Hello and welcome to the Winners Find a Way show. I am your host, Trent Clark. Super excited that you're joining us here today on the Winners Find a Way show. I am CEO of Leadershipity, a serial entrepreneur. I am a international speaker, speaking globally all over the world. A lot about my new book by Wiley Business called Leading Winning Teams. But most people know me because I spent over 13 years in professional baseball coaching in 3 World Series. And today I welcome on the Winners Find a Way show, Mike Gunderson of Gunder. What's up, buddy?
How you doing, Trent?
Well, first of all, I've always known you from Gunderson Direct. Maybe something related to your last name. I'm not sure. But you have been one of the prominent direct mail consumer companies and providers for brands globally, San Francisco based. And are you Silicon Valley based?
Yeah, well, we're Silicon Valley based here in the San Francisco Bay Area. So, yeah, we've served to provide direct mail programs for much of the startups you may have heard of, Square, SoFi, PAL, and then also established brands like Wells Fargo, Union Bank, I'm trying to think of all the other huge companies we've worked with. But I was thinking about AAA for some reason that escaped me.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, it's a massive business. I mean, I look for my mail directs almost monthly. I always see something in there that I use in my real world. I mean, when you have 5 kids, you look for direct mail opportunities and vouchers, right? They're like, "Hey, man, I can save some money, right?" And it's a great way to market, right? And actually, snail mail has gotten less. So actually, I think it sticks out more. Tell me a little bit about being a Silicon Valley where everything is like digital and the world is like, oh man, everything's got to be online. And you're like, I'm a direct mail guy. And yet, here's some of the biggest brands we're talking about who are directly in still the direct mail business because they still find value, right? So, how's that feel when you're there? Are you looked as like the guy who's like waiting to die over here because that'll never be real business kind of thing?
Well, it's interesting. When I started Gunderson Direct, it was back in 2003. And we would be pitching all kinds of different companies, really before 2008, before the internet and mobile really took off. And so it was a lot easier to convince folks of the power of direct mail then because there wasn't as much noise around it. And so I was a young guy kind of talking to older marketers at the time about direct mail. And so they believed in direct mail, but they didn't necessarily believe in the young guy. But we were able to make our way anyhow. And then after 2008, digital just kind of it was. I mean, it was huge growth, and so we found ourselves actually being the older guys talking to the younger marketers and trying to convince them direct mail is a really great way to target and reach customers. And for the ones that listen and for the ones that wanted to give it a try and utilize our company Gunder to do that, they found huge success. And I mean, we're talking about huge companies that started direct mail with Gunder. And so once we start to build that confidence with them, we're kind of known as a secret weapon. It's everybody's doing digital, but not everybody's doing direct mail these days. And what they don't know is it's a highly responsive, highly converting channel for growth marketers.
Yeah, I think people do miss that. And the beautiful thing about what you do at Gunder is there is a direct measure on that ROI, right? It is very, I don't want to say easy, but it is very forward thinking that here I have X amount of things that have been put into the market. This is my return on that. Here's my cost against that. The ROI is extensive, which is why your clients return. It's a pretty good gig, and you're one of the best at it in the world. And I tell you, for those of you who don't know, Gundy and I met with EO. We're both entre organization members. At least we were back in the day. I do a lot of speaking for EO, and Mike and I met in San Francisco as we were doing a big program in the Bay Area on mentorship,
Yeah.
which is a huge give back, Mike. And I know you've always had a passion for giving other people that information as an entrepreneur and how do you get ahead. I mean, we are absolutely hyper learners, right? We learn very quickly, very fast, and you have to adapt. And for people who want to be in entrepreneurship, someone like you that comes alongside and really helps them, I really honor that, Mike. And it's always been impressive to see you work inside your community.
Well, thank you. No, well, you've been great too. Obviously, you managed to moderate a lot of those sessions, but even so, as I've continued to grow my company here, I'm always looking for a mentor as well as providing mentorship to to younger folks, or even folks that are just looking to grow their business. So it's super important, especially in our community. And Yo does such a great job of
Yeah, for sure. Now you're a SoCal kid out in the Inland Empire, baby. Corona.
that.
I'm not talking about the beer. I'm talking about the Corona. It's the mountains, man. Like Corona's kind of cool. I've got a couple ball player buddies who live out there. And you left SoCal to come up to San Francisco for the Academy of Art. Great
Yeah.
school. Probably one of the top real estate holders of all San Francisco.
Yeah.
The college is amazing, and you start a family there. You have get married, 3 kids, and you're pumping not only Gunder but your newest Post Reminder, which is a fabulous brand as well. And you're just cooking on all cylinders right now, but not always without its challenge. Is that fair?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that today, but I'll get into this. What most people don't know about Gundy here is that Gundy actually, for a long time, has collected antique Swiss music boxes.
That's right.
Yeah,
It's a little known fact, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's because
now it's not so little known. I'll just tell you that right now.
it could be because of my, my affinity towards offline. But I love music boxes mainly because they're spring powered. Everything that moves on a Swiss music box is not plugged into the wall, and there's something really, really authentic and cool about that. And one of the things, not to nerd out on it too much, but one of the things I love most about it is when you play a music box today, it's exactly as it would have sounded back in 1850, and that's pretty cool. There's not a lot that can do that,
Yeah.
and it does. And if it's well maintained, it doesn't degrade. It's exactly as it sounded when somebody was using it as entertainment, 150 years ago.
It's funny, and you talk about the innovation, right, of the Swiss with watches with this spring system, right? And they really dialed it in early, pardon the pun. And I find it amazing because one of the things I thought about immediately was, we bought some things for our kids. My mother-in-law passed at a very young age, and we wanted to record things for her. So we recorded like ornaments and things like that for our children. So they would hear her voice every Christmas, and it was so important to us. And my mother has recorded like book readings, and my father did that too, who's passed now. And listen, man, it's a decade later, it's 2 decades, and it's all degraded, man.
Yeah.
It all sounds trashy, and you're just like, man, I thought this was going to be this, digital imprint that would be good forever, right? And turns out not so great. So, when someone had it right in 1850, you just have to honor the innovation of it all, right? Which is just really something special.
Yeah, it's very cool. Just a real quick side note. I was my daughter. I'm not sure when this will be posted, but my daughter's graduating from 8th grade this Friday, and she received her yearbook. And I was going through the yearbook, and I saw a QR code in the yearbook that said, "Scan this QR code to see the performance." And it was a performance of one of the dance, clubs that were in the school. And I'm like, in 30 years, when she goes back to that, is that QR code still going to work? Is it still going to be live? I'm very curious by that.
Yeah.
That was an interesting thing to put it in there, because even when you go back, you're like, oh yeah, we have these QR codes. And what they did was, instead of it launching a hologram, it launched a video. Like, what are you going to tell your kids when they see
Yeah.
that 30 years from
I
now?
mean, first of all, the video medium probably won't be there anymore. That's
I
it.
know.
That's the challenge. But it's funny because as you talk about, and you are in the QR code. I mean, the post
That's right.
reminder.
Yeah.
You've taken QR codes to the next level, and you may know my story, and not everybody does. But I was a kid who wrote out my goals when I was in 7th grade with a great teacher.
Yeah. It's
And
amazing.
fast forward was, life of like what it's going to be like when I was 30. So this was 1982. I wrote those out. And in 1999, right at the millennium, at 2000, I got a letter in the mail from my 7th grade teacher with my assignment, that I'd written out 18 years before. And I thought that was so cool. And just as you said that, I thought, oh my God, how cool would that be for a teacher to time capsule that information and go, hey, scan the QR code out of your yearbook, right? And be like, oh my gosh, look at my goals. Look what I was thinking like at that time. I
Yeah.
think that would be such a preservation of coolness, man. That's because it was really special for me to receive that. And it was a great reflection of how impactful that first little goal setting exercise was in my lifetime, like of like, hey, what do you really want to be doing? And he was very intentional about spending the time. I mean, he might have been calling it in the week before spring break or something, but he convinced us all that it was important. I thought it was important because I had older brothers and an older sister, and I took it really seriously. And it was amazing how much of my life was correlated to those goals as a 12-year-old, right? And it was like, whoa.
Well, even when you go back, we're on EOS right now, but we started that, like, I guess, right before the pandemic. And so when you go back to those goals and you see that those goals have been clearly achieved, it's pretty cool to have that timeline and have that history, because people say set goals, but if you don't set them and write them down and you don't go back to them, you don't really understand how much you've grown. And it's that mindset of just having it there, just knowing that there's a destination that you need to get to, that allows you to to achieve what you want to achieve, but to go back and be like, oh yeah, wow, I did. It's pretty cool.
Well, and
And I don't know, this teacher of yours is amazing. If he sent that to you how many years later?
yeah,
That's
18,
fantastic. What
18. I
I
mean,
mean,
how cool is that, right? That's a
yeah,
dedicated teacher.
it's awesome.
Yeah, it's very cool. And I think what you just mentioned was incredible. I'm a partner with Bloom Growth. I don't know if you use that software to track your EOS. And I have a lot of clients that, track their quarterlies on Bloom Growth. I use a little different system than EOS, right? I use the Bloom system where it's a little bit, comprehensive, but it's a great business systems. If you're using one, and EOS is a very good one, it's awesome, people. Like, and listen to what he's telling you, because one of the most critical assets of what he just said is it's sometimes hard. And if anyone's ever read the book The Gap and the Gain, right? The Gap by the coach, I can think of his name here, from Strategic Coach, and he talks about that gap. Like, when we look back and go, wow, when we look at our goals 6 years ago, we've literally 5x'd past that goal. We were all fired up about, hey, what we're gonna do in 2019, baby? It's like, wow, we do that now every quarter.
Yeah.
And it's so important and we talked about this offline before. It's so important for us to celebrate the fact of where we were, and we were a good team. And there was a team of 10 of us, 12 of us, and now we're a team of 30. And we're Gunder, and we've rebranded our deal, and we're a big part of it. And we wouldn't have done that without the right people taking on the right roles and doing this all together. And it's a tribute to what you've accomplished in these many years together. I mean, it's very cool.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I have to give a true shout out. We met through EO on multiple occasions, through not only events, but also, being more intimate, like when you were moderating and stuff on boards and everything else. But I'm not going to say I 100% contribute my growth to EO, but it wasn't until EO I really understood what I was capable of. And so
Mm.
if you have the opportunity to get into Accelerator or get into EO, you're making the revenue minimum and you can get in there. To me, it's like, it's a no-brainer. It's kind of that always be learning philosophy. And when you got that many guys that are successful, and then that many guys who aren't successful or aren't successful at this time, at this moment, what you learn from them is unbelievable. Because the problem is, nobody tells you about their failures, but an EO, man, do they experience share and tell you, hey, I had this same exact issue, I had this employee, I had this relationship, I had this client. And it's just hearing the good doesn't get you anywhere. It's really understanding, that the diversity in some of those business owners, and understanding how they were able to navigate getting back on top, personally for me.
Well, and I think you just hit it right on the head, which is you hear the good and the bad. And it's the top 5%. And one of Bloom's founders on that software, Todd Smart, actually was one of the contributors that brought that in, the top and bottom 5%. What do you share? And so I want to be very clear, these are now you're networking with the top 4% of all businesses. Only less than 4% of all businesses make $1 million or more per year top line revenue in their company. America and North America is built on small business. So the men and women who actually qualify for this deal are already rare air. They've already achieved a bunch of things. They've already had to overcome a lot of things. We're going to talk a little bit about what you had to overcome along the way. I mean, let's get into that for a minute. I love as part of the show, winners when shown data that they are losing find a way to win. And Gundy, I've always surrounded myself with guys like you and women like you because they're resilient. They have resolve. And man, as an athlete, like I just can't even imagine quitting on the first failure. Like, I'm in baseball, right?
Yeah.
You fail 70% of the times, you're gonna quit on the first one. Like, hey man, you're never getting a hit and you're never gonna get another at bat. So like you better go face it and adapt fast. And
Yeah.
man, in pro sports, if you don't adapt quickly and learn quickly, you don't stay. And I think entrepreneurship is very similar. And so, as we look at some of the things like that you came along with, what was one of those early challenges that you faced, Mike, where you're kind of up against it, things aren't going the right direction, and all the data is going, man, we're not winning. We're going to have to do something different. Walk me through one of those early scenarios and how you addressed it and dealt with it.
Well, I don't know about early, but recently, in fact, last year was rough for the agency. We had made some changes on the biz dev front that we thought were going to be really great for the business, and the changes were really going out. We're in a direct mail business. We understand the test and learn kind of philosophy here. And what we found was if we can increase our volume on new business coming in, this allows us to get clients that are a little bit more serious about the mail and allow them to do more testing and optimization within the mail in order to get a better result and then ultimately roll out. So ultimately scale their mail program, roll out and have a monthly program. So that's kind of how we want to bring on business here. But we made a strategic decision early on last year, to increase the volume. So go from 100,000 pieces of mail to 300,000 pieces of mail. And we were doing this kind of what we call leap and repeat strategy, where we would have three different drops at 100,000 pieces of mail to equal that 300. And we decided that let's just do one big drop at 300,000 pieces of mail, which both work well. And what we found is that the leap and repeat works better. And that's kind of the story. Is what we found was we were pitching this new strategy to prospects, and they really liked it. But what they didn't like was the price tag associated with it on that very first drop, the risk associated with the higher revenue amount that they'd have to go with in order to do this new strategy. And what we found was whether it was a better strategy or not, we found that they would ultimately go with some of our competitors basically because it was a lower barrier of entry. It was a lower cost to test direct mail. And although we were saying, we're going to promise you're going to test this direct mail, you're going to get more learnings out of it, and you're going to end up scaling faster and better, everybody else is saying that too at that lower volume. And so now it's like, well, do I believe Gunderson or do I believe the competitor? And can I get the same amount of testing as what this competitor is saying? And it's a lot cheaper. And so they ended up going in that direction. And so, we stuck with it for longer than we should have, probably, 4, 6, maybe even 8 months, because I wanted to make sure it wasn't just I was testing and learning too. So I didn't want to just throw it out because it didn't work the first month or second month or third month. I wanted to make sure that if we were able to capture one of those clients at that higher volume, can we then eventually turn it into bigger business? And so we did it and we stuck with it, which I still think was a good decision. But we ended up losing a lot of deal flow because a lot of that ended up going to some of our competitors or direct to printers, maybe, or maybe they ended up doing it themselves. And so once we understood that, we ended up essentially adjusting that strategy, kind of going back and refining what we did before. And coming into 2024, it's been gangbusters. It's been working a lot better. We've been closing a lot more business. And the clients themselves are just much more comfortable at coming in at a little bit lower volumes. And again, we're going to end up with the same kind of testing and the same amount of mail that's going to go out there. But now it's broken up into kind of three separate budgets where they can feel pretty good about it and ultimately have that test and learn strategy earlier instead of having to commit to that large quantity all at once.
Yeah, so there's two things in that that's just really big for me, Mike. One is that a group of leaders got together, felt like, hey, we're going to grow our deal band. We're going to get bigger volume up front. This is going to be great for our business, better for our cash flow, right? If we get bigger up front. And it all sounds good and right. And then you run into a losing staff, right? And what I love is as a leadership group, we can undo anything decisions we make. And I think being adaptable and recognizing, like, hey, we all thought that was a good idea and it really looked good on the whiteboard, but it's not being executed to the level that we wanted at. We're going to have to undo and go back and look at it. But we don't just go back to the original. We go back and go, what did we learn here that we can still apply and adapt? And my assumption is, and you tell me if I'm wrong, my assumption is if I hired you to do the 300,000 pieces up front, that would be a lower price than me paying you 3 times on the 100,000. So technically, you're making more revenue off me doing it this way, but I have ability to do more of my strategic planning and my spending plan because I don't have this quarter where I'm like, whoa, I got a lot of marketing expense out because I talk in spending plans, not budgets,
Yeah.
because I think budgets are like what I've heard, and Mike, you might speak to this, but anytime I'm working with a great organization and I say budget, it's like everyone glosses over like budget. Like there's only one person who gets excited, leans in on their seat, opens up 12 Excel sheets, and the rest of them like literally like they gloss over, their eyes roll back in their head, and I'm like, so if I talk spending plan, and so people understand that, if Mike's doing $20 million and he's making $4 million EBITDA a year, he's got a $16 million spending plan. So that's what he's going to spend. And he's like, hey, how are we going to allocate our resources to make sure that we make our revenue? And of course, the numbers will come in and adapt. You might make 22, you might make 19.5, like all these things will come in, but we do have a plan. And it's so important. And so I think those are two just huge elements of what you learned in this year. And I think the other factor I think you should talk to a little bit is a little bit of a perfect storm. You may have erred, right? The team may have thought like, hey, this wasn't, but also we got a lot of talking heads going, oh, the economy is going down.
Yeah.
Milk is $17 a gallon. You'll probably have to start drinking, get a goat. I mean, panic in the streets on the economy, which is also pulling back on the revenue. So providing a little bit of perfect storm for Gunder. Is that fair?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there was a lot. I mean, that going into 2023 with that sales philosophy for us felt really good. It was like, okay, to your point, more revenue, cheaper cost per impression, cost per piece for our clients or our prospects, because more volume equals efficiencies and efficiencies equal lower cost. We're really in the manufacturing business here doing direct mail because we have to print, convert, and send this mail out, right? And unlike digital channels, as you scale direct mail, go into higher volumes, your actual cost per impression actually decrease, unlike bidding up your digital marketing to insane pricing. So yeah, everything we thought was the right way, but what we didn't really account for was there's a threshold here that there's a price threshold that the market will bear. That market being marketing managers at SMB and Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 5,000 companies. And so what is it? And we missed the mark on it. And again, I still don't regret what we did, because had it worked, it would have been great all the way around. It would have been cheaper impression costs for our clients. It would have been bigger volumes and faster learning for us and our clients, and it would have been great. But if I didn't stick to it, we would not know that. But we knew that making the change back with some refinements and would end up putting us back where we needed to be, and that's exactly what happened, or is
Well,
what's happening currently.
Well, and I think as you reflect on that and recognize, hey man, I resolve a lot of pain still in that program. And even though my clients don't recognize that yet, I tell a lot of my clients, like, hey, sounds like a great 2027 initiative. I don't think it's dead. It may, we're back to, it may not be Mr. Right. It might just be Mr. Right, not right now. Right. So like Mr. Right may be 2027 on this plan, and let's hit that thing again and really show them the value, because you've got a proven model that's a winner, and people start going, man, the ROI has been so good. And all of a sudden you go, hey, want to increase your ROI another 15 points? Because I got a way to bring your price point per each touch way down. They're like, whoa, what do you mean? Right. And then maybe somebody's ready for it.
Yeah, and we saw that benefit like crazy because, as I mentioned, the secret the secret weapon reference earlier, like if it works and you scale, you go from 200,000 to 500,000, 500,000 to a million, million to 5 million, whatever it is. You're going from, I mean, literally, you're going from, 92 cents at the lower volumes all the way down to 54, 48, 54 cents per piece. So
Math.
as you scale, yeah, it's huge efficiencies, and then you're also increasing your response rates by testing, and you're increasing your conversion rates by messaging. And so you're not only getting the lower cost, but you're getting higher conversions, higher responses, and that's ultimately going to drive a much more favorable ROI at the end of the day for this marketing channel.
For those who are listening, this is why you go with the experts. This is why you go with a Gunder, because they're constantly trialing it out. They're working on making it better, working in
21
efficient.
years, man.
Yeah, and what it looked like, and if we were to sit down and go, hey, what did it look like 21 years ago? It doesn't look anything like today. Like we had some good ideas, and we thought, oh, this is gonna be awesome, and then we were like, oh shit, that doesn't work. Like this is, oh crap. Like what are we gonna do here? And so boom, all of a sudden, ideas were like this wide 21 years ago, and now they're here. And what Gunder does for you is they keep going narrow, 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 and they're just increasing your ROI all the time. And that's what good brands do for you. That's what good guides do for you. That's why you want the right players on your team. And Gunder is a good player on your team, and that doesn't have to be internal to your team. You have lots of players on your team that are contractors. They're vendors. They're people that you use. But you got to choose. And I'm telling you, I talk a lot about it in leading winning teams. As you're positioning to win, you've got to have the right people on your team. Like you've got to be prepared for what's about to happen, and you've got to have people that are always forward thinkers like this, because it's like a swimming pool, right? I've used this a lot. It's a swimming pool with 8 lanes, and you've got one lane that's falling behind, and it's like they're not keeping up, and all of a sudden algae's growing in that lane, and it's just looking, and the 2 lanes next to it are just going, oh my gosh, I got to do double time because Mike on this side and Teresa on this side have got to make up for Trent's inefficiency, and they're pissed, right? And their job and their work is hard. Listen, if I'm really bad, it's not going to be long before the whole pool turns yellow, right? And you can't have it on your team, because now you're sudden you're positioning, pushing a rock uphill, and it's just not going to work well. And when you're positioned, everybody's doing their thing. You have a pristine pool, always ready for action, and they're doing it well. I think one of the things that I'd like to pivot to, as a mentor of people, from your learnings from your mentors, you talked to me offline that one of the things I was really impressed about is you wanted to be an entrepreneur as a kid, but at the same time, what do I know about it, right? Like I got to learn, and you do some big corporate work. I mean, you're with Chevron, you're with Providian. I mean, financial, like you're with some big brands, cutting your teeth on a lot of learnings in a corporate world before you ever get maybe even, I dare say, the confidence to say, hey, I'm ready to take this leap. Tell me what you learned in that.
Yeah, no, I have to say that when you said entrepreneur, I've always had little side gigs when I was in high school and stuff, and so I just always loved it. I am, and even when I worked for large corporations, I had side gigs with doing design work, logos, everything.
Hmm.
But one thing I realized was when I moved up here to San Francisco, I had the opportunity to work for Chevron and Chevron Corporate in San Francisco, and I worked for their real estate management company. So I had the opportunity to be in school at the Academy of Art and be a graphic designer for Chevron, which just 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 for context, my, I really wanted to work in a skyscraper or a high rise somewhere, and to be in one of the top companies in the world at the time, in a skyscraper in San Francisco, looking out the window was a dream come true. It was just kind of that Michael J. Fox moment, like I made it,
Yeah.
and I loved it. And so I started doing graphic design there and started making moves and meeting people within that organization, to where I ended up was like, I don't know if I mean, I'm doing what I want to do. I don't know if I need to finish the Academy of Art. And it got me really excited. And what happened was, the whole reason I'm in direct mail these days is Chevron was moving all their offices over to the East Bay, and I still wanted to work in San Francisco. And so I ended up getting a job at Providian Financial, which some of the listeners will not remember. But if they were around 20 years ago, they may have gotten a credit card from them. They may have had bad credit, and Providian was there to fill that gap. And so I started doing direct mail for that organization, and I was really into it. I was like really into doing graphic design for performance. That's exactly what it is. Direct mail is performance marketing. And when you're a graphic designer, and you can change a photo, change an image, change a headline, and get increased response rates and be able to actually measure that, it's pretty cool. And so a few designers were as interested as I was, and so I got the eye of a bunch of different people. Every other designers and art directors and creative directors within Providian, but then also marketing managers who worked at Providian. And so when I left Providian and started Gunderson Direct, now Gunder, I they called on me. That's how I started my business. I started my business through the relationships of those corporate relationships. And so when I talk to younger folks, especially coming out of college or wanting to start their career, and entrepreneur, by the way, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, was not hip, was not cool. Entrepreneur is like, everybody wants to be an entrepreneur now, and it's hip, it's rock star status. It feels like at some of these conferences I go to with people like Gary Vee and everybody else. But ultimately, if you start there, you don't have a lot of the learnings you need in order to grow that network and grow that business. And so having that corporate experience, especially with Providian, honestly, grew my company, built my company, because the marketing managers I worked at Providian went to Wells Fargo. The marketing managers I worked with Providian went to Intuit and went to AAA. And so I automatically had a network. And when they needed direct mail design services, they called Gunderson Direct in order to help them beat their control packages. So I say that don't rush so fast to get into the entrepreneurship game. I think it's awesome if you can, and there's plenty that do, but don't devalue what it is to be in a corporate environment or a larger company in order just to start getting the stepping stones to start to build out your career, especially early on, like in your early 20s. This is a great opportunity to be an entrepreneur and start a company, but still work for a large corporation and kind of double dip in that experience.
Yeah, I think that's such good advice. And I think about that. Even one of the businesses I started a gym business, designing gyms for athletes' homes. Well, I was already a trusted advisor to athletes at that time. So
Yeah.
other athletes were happy to go, oh, this guy not only knows his fitness and helping you prepare for what's about to happen, but now he's going to show you how to invest $100,000 into your home, take a tax write off, because you're an entrepreneur and you're like, hey man, this is part of your business. And so you don't pay taxes on that spend. And so that's awesome for you, especially as a W-2 employee. And so like, man, anything when you make that kind of money that you can write off on taxes is a big deal, right? So yeah, that was huge. It put me on the map. It gave me hundreds of thousands of revenue almost out the gate, right?
The
And
credibility is everything these days. So
yeah,
much of what you see, you can't even believe. So, if you're working for a corporation, if you're working for a sports team, you get that built-in credibility. You're not going to get that just coming out of college with nothing to say. You have to build something. And so, and let's face it, we both know entrepreneurs that hit it out of the park with just one great idea. We know that.
yeah,
But I will say that I think your batting average is going to be much higher, right? If you have that experience built in, and kind of understand the game, both at a macro and a large view of like, how does it get played all the way down. Because I'll tell you, I've sold plenty of contracts to large Fortune 500 companies, because I know how Fortune 500 companies are looking at those contracts. And the thing is, you can't do that. You don't understand how to do that until you've had some of that experience.
yep. Yep. And I don't think, and I think we've learned as entrepreneurs, a personal referral will is probably the most valuable thing we'll ever get, right? And so it means so much to us that our relationships matter, our vendors matter, our clients matter, because we really have a lot of honor for that. We know how hard it is to acquire a new client, and that's very challenging. And so, as hard as we've worked in our time, man, you can't discount it. And the fact that you had all that experience and the corporation already knew you had the ability to do it was such a key element. And then to add the testimonial of such a big brand automatically into you, and who would go on as a reference for you, and that's such a big deal. So great lesson for you out there, especially you budding entrepreneurs, which is booming right now. And don't believe the hype. It is not an easy road. I mean, it is challenging, and all the people on my show will help you get there in a better way. I really second what Mike said about joining an organization that's going to take you to the promised land and help you and be around like-minded people, because they will help and you will hyper learn fast. So with the finish here, Mike, tell us if you knew a group, if you knew someone was struggling today, and kind of where you were a year ago, where you're like, wow, people aren't investing what they did, they're worried about the economy, our system's not working the way we'd hoped, and you're seeing those losing things. What would you tell somebody that may be facing a challenge like that and needs to find a different way? What would you tell them today?
Don't put your head in the sand. I mean, you have to raise your hand and say, I need help here. And whether that's your significant other, whether that's friends, which sometimes are friends in the entrepreneur community that don't own their own businesses have a hard time understanding what it's like. But if there's a local group like an EO or something like that, for me, that makes all the difference. And and I know that we have Forum and EO, and monthly we report on our metrics and kind of what we're looking at doing, and we have that support system in place. But if you don't, you can't, your business will be gone if you don't raise your hand and get some help. And there's a lot of resources out there to either to help you through a jam. Your local banker can help you through a jam. If you just talk to them, they may not give you a loan, but they would actually they have a lot of insight on
And
what
resources.
and resources. And so don't be afraid to say, "Hey, man, I'm struggling here. I had a really great product last year. It was working. This competitor came along, and now they're taking all my market share. What can I do to shake this up a little bit?" And you'll have options. Maybe the option is to sell to them. Maybe the option is to rejigger what you've done. Maybe it's being a completely different business, or maybe it's to get a second job so you can figure out and weather the storm. So, for me, I see too many people just not do anything, and it's too far gone. You can't recover from that. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
I would
that would
I
be
would
my
say the other thing that I really feel like, Mike, you didn't miss it, but you do it. You have a business operating system. You have data all the time in your software. So you can go back to data, KPIs, team is breaking down information that you've been tracking a long time. And so you can see patterns, you can see signs of what's happening. And if you know your data, if you're measuring the right things, and I am for certain that Mike Gunderson looked at all that as he was going through challenging times to look at, hey, what do we need to change here? What's the numbers that have now set us against our normal process of winning? And so when you discover that, you realize, like, hey, we either got to go back to a process that does help us win, or we have to adjust and get back to those KPIs that we know deliver the results we need. And so for everybody on the Winners Find a Way show, thank you so much for joining us. Mike Gunderson of Gunder and Post Reminder. Tell them where they can find you real quick, Mike.
Yeah, so check us out on gunder.com. That's gundir.com. And then if you're interested in learning more about Post Reminder, which is a new kind of marketing platform that we developed to help remind folks of advertised offers and events, you can check out postreminder.com. And then you can, of course, just contact me directly at mike@gunder.com.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm super excited about Post Reminder as a guy who's coming out with my new book, Winning Teams, August 20th. I want to put out a post reminder out there and let everybody know, hey, remember on August 18th, hey, 2 days, my book launches. Go buy it. I get so excited about that. If you're interested in buying it, pre-sale, we have a bunch of specials. I'm going to leave that below. We are doing all sorts of bulk orders right now, and great way to get bulk and a speaker, as Gundy and I talked about. I've moderated and spoke a lot of different places, and it's a great event, and you can do it kind of on the cheap by doing books and booking me, where I'm offering tons of discounts for that bulk buy from Barnes and Noble, my partners there, and Wiley, of course, my publisher. So check that out below. For everybody else, thank you so much for joining us on the Winners Find a Way show every Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern, 9:30 a.m. Pacific. And my special guest, Mike Gunderson, my buddy in crime here. Gunder, you're so good. Thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, we will see you as winners find a way.
All right, Trent, take care.